Good morning. This is Ed Lyell, and this is Economic Mortar, a twice-monthly radio show talking about how to rebuild the U.S. economy on solid, long-term principles and not be so focused on the financial industry and its casino-like behavior. The nature of the show, it's the first and Tuesday mornings of each month, the first and third Tuesday mornings each month, and we've got half an hour here, and it's a call-in show, and so I'll set the stage for some topics, and I've got a couple today that I want to kick off with and then see what listeners want to focus on. I'm Ed Lyell. I'm a professor of business and economics at Adams State University and have a doctorate in those things. And I can be more information about me, or you can email me questions, topics, and such, either at edlyell.com is my webpage, or on Facebook it's Dr. Ed Lyell, or my email's edlyell@amigo.net. Anyway, let's look at things. There's several things in the news these days. One is real proof from economists around the world that austerity, or cutting spending, does not help an economy grow or expand during this kind of economic conditions, which technically are a liquidity trap. And so we've now had even the two major economists that several years ago said they did a study showing that cutting spending and austerity would grow economies. Now their evidence was flawed. The way they did it was flawed. And even they, two Harvard professors of economics, have gone forward explaining that they were wrong. And so the International Monetary Fund, which is an international group that looks at the economies of the world, they've told the prime ministers and leaders of the world, stop doing spending cuts. That just continues to lengthen or make even worse the recession depression. And in Europe, they've been doing this for a number of years, and they're in worse shape now than they were 4 years ago. So there's been a call and the highest levels to change what's going on. The only two countries that are not listening are the United States and England. They continue to want to just cut taxes, particularly on the rich, and keep cutting spending at the very wrong time to cut spending. And for those deficit hawks or people, and I'm actually one of them, I have no problem with over time cutting the size of government or doing things that the Tea Party might want. The timing's critical. It's something that should be done when the economy's running well. It's what we should have done and was being done by President Clinton. If we had done that all the way through the Bush administration, if we had cut spending then, we'd be in good shape now with basically no federal debt. But President Bush, too, took us in the opposite direction, cut taxes, particularly on the wealthy, and then took us into some trillion-dollar wars. And that's what's left us with the problem. And then the Obama administration came in, and the current Congress, and in my mind, and many economists, they're not doing the right thing or not enough of the right thing. Anyway, so we can talk about that, austerity, sequestration. Another one, and the time of year this comes out, is the cost of college. And some good economic papers have come out recently saying, why not make higher education free? And how is it that countries in Northern Europe have been making university free for years and years? And that's one of the reasons that the average income in the Norways and Denmarks and those Northern European countries, their average family income now is twice that of the United States. And 40 years ago, they were half that of the United States. There are known reasons. There are known economic policies that either make you better or worse, and the U.S. for decades has been doing what makes us worse. And this is decades. It's not just Republican, Democrat. But why not go to that? And just to give some numbers, I don't have New Mexico numbers. I have a grandson starting up at CSU in the fall, and so I was looking at their tuition increases. And they're similar to everything in Colorado and, unfortunately, most of the nation. In 2004 and 5, tuition at CSU for a year was $2,900. And then what's proposed for next year is going to be $7,500. And they've more than doubled their tuition, as have all the Colorado universities and colleges, including Adams State, where I'm a professor, which does try very hard to be at very low cost, but we've, between tuition and fees, we've made it far more expensive. If we had taken the CSU number, 2004, of just under $3,000 tuition, if we just inflation adjusted that up to the current time, then their tuition should only be $3,600, not what's going to be almost $7,000. And it's similar for Adams State. Adams State fall is going to be $3,300, well below CSU. And, people at both universities, and all of them, are trying to find ways to be more cost effective. But in my mind, none are doing enough because nobody's changing the basic classroom delivery system. Nobody's changing the basic model that says we really pay for seat time, like how many hours are you in a classroom. We could go to something based on competency, demonstrate skills and what you've learned, and we'll give you the credit hours and the degree. And in my mind, we could probably get most students through in half the time with at least the same, if not better, skills. But you have to abandon this seat time scheduled class model. And Oxford's been doing it for hundreds of years, but it's hard to sell anywhere else. Anyway, so we can talk about the cost of college. But let me talk about what to me is a biggie, is Al Gore has a new book out, and it's titled The Future. And I recommend this book for everyone to read. And for those that are, seeing everything through the prism of partisan politics, it's like, oh, I'm never going to read anything from that Democrat or that liberal or, label Al Gore however you like. But he actually wrote a book that is not based on left, right, or Republican, Democrat. He wrote a very insightful, forward-looking book based on where we're going in the world. And it's not U.S., it's the whole world. And it's not just climate change. He's identified what most of us all would say are, all the big picture items that the world should be paying attention to. And done a good job of this. I mean, just his citations or footnotes or bibliography is 133 single-space pages. So it's well-researched, citing true experts around the world, and one I highly recommend that everyone read. It's called The Future, and it's Al Gore. And Al Gore, was vice president under Clinton. He was a U.S. senator. His father was a U.S. senator. He comes from smart parents, but also wealthy parents, and he himself has made over $100 million. So, as much as I bash the richest 1%, as I keep trying to tell people, there are many in that category who do wonderful things, and we've got one here in the Valley that's been great with environmental stuff. A guy named Bacon, a billionaire, and we've got examples of super wealthy people doing good things around the country and world. Many of them, however, don't do good things with their wealth. Okay, so here are the 6 drivers of global change from Al Gore's perspective. And he's arguing that we have revolutionary change going on, basically being thrust upon us by forces bigger than nation states, bigger than economic systems. These are the big things that are happening. And he argues, as I always do, that whatever can be seen as a threat is also an opportunity. So you don't have to somehow say, oh, woe is me, and dive into a hole or a bottle. you really can say, whoa, look at all these new opportunities to have an even better life and be more successful. The facts are there. The evidence about change that's occurring is there. It's real. But we have a choice as to how we deal with it. And I'm always telling my students, choose to see things as opportunities. Recognize threat, but then find the opportunities. So here are his 6 things. Number 1 is ever-increasing economic globalization, what he calls Earth Inc., an integrated, holistic entity with new and different relationships to capital, labor, consumer markets, and national governments. Really arguing that the centuries-old labor versus capital issue really needs to sort of be pushed aside and look at things from different perspectives. But also that consumer markets are more important than national governments, that goods and money flow across those borders instantly, and the role of national governments gets smaller and smaller. Second big picture, the worldwide digital communications, internet, and computer revolutions has created what Al Gore calls the global mind, which links the thoughts and feelings of billions of people and connects intelligent machines, robots, ubiquitous sensors, and databases. Big Brother is watching. We can now have somebody swallow a capsule, and inside the capsule is a camera that takes hundreds of thousands of pictures as it moves through the gut of a person. I had a friend of mine in Trinidad, his life was saved by one of these because he was bleeding out internally. They couldn't find out what it was. He does this at that time almost experimental technique, and that little camera finds that he's got a tear in a small intestine. Once doctors knew where it was, they could fix him, and he's going strong. Kept a good, in his case, Republican going, guy that I used to both, battle on some issues and share thoughts on issues. But the technology truly is life-saving. Then we've got the third item for Al Gore, and just go to algore.inc.com, I forget which it is, and you can find more on this. The third issue is the balance of global political, economic, and military power is shifting more profoundly than any time in the last 500 years. And he does a good job in his book of researching back not just 500 years, but thousands of years to see long-term patterns of change and patterns of how things move over time. Really, to me, a good read. And one I can't use my speed reading on very well because not that often can I say this, but I stop and have to really think. But this thing is that we're moving from a U.S.-centered system to one with multiple emerging centers of power. And so we've got centuries of, the Portuguese or the French or the English, and then the U.S. and Soviet Union, these spheres of influence. But that's not a big deal anymore, that, no one country is seen as a world leader anymore, much as many might like to be seen that way. But instead, nation-states give up power, and now we have more private actors. And by that he means big corporations, wealthy individuals, and non-governmental organizations, groups that transcend boundaries, groups that are not tied to a particular country or a nation-state, and instead focus more on markets. What do people want? What's the consumer want? And focusing on that consumer want or need list wherever they are. His next one is we have a deeply flawed economic compass leading us to unsustainable growth in consumption, pollution, depletion of the planet's strategic resources of topsoil, freshwater, and living species. And this would be more where his climate change issue of several years ago, when he got all kinds of awards and Nobel Prize and whatever for what he called the inconvenient truth. That's all true, but it's now just one of his 6 big things. The next one is that genomic, biotechnology, neuroscience, and life science are all radically transforming the fields of medicine, agriculture, and molecular science. And this all being quotes, it's putting control of evolution in human hands. And that is a biggie, particularly for people that are very focused on their religious beliefs. But it is the idea that, people are now storing cells. People are, they tend to be the wealthy, but people are having parts of a liver or a kidney stored, or they're growing a spare organ. And so that when they might need that organ, they just have to unfreeze it. And this is happening around the world. The scientists now can do these things. They can grow life in a petri dish. They can grow what we think of as meat for eating without ever bothering with the animal. So they can grow pig and cow and all literally in a lab, and it will have the same nutritional value and be far cheaper than raising animals, along with all the high cost of raising animals in terms of water and methane gas production. Just fascinating stuff, although I'm still not convinced I want to eat any of it. And then his last point is there's been a radical disruption of the relationship between human beings and the Earth's ecosystems, along with the beginning of a revolutionary transformation of energy systems, agriculture, transportation, and construction. We can now create products, even in our home, with what are called three-dimensional printers. So you can sit down on a computer-assisted design, computer-assisted manufacturing software, design a new product, push a button, and a three-dimensional printer printing out probably something, think of plastic, but various kinds of composite materials, it will build you that. One of the issues that came up in all the recent battles about gun manufacturing is now people can produce a gun in their home out of plastics. So even if nobody could go buy a gun from a factory in a store, we now can have people can sit down and produce a gun at home, and good or bad, that gun will not even be detectable because it's going to be out of non-metal materials. These are big game changers. These are drivers of global change in everything we do, in economics, in food systems, in daily life, privacy issues, productivity issues, and some of it can be seen as terrible or be fearful, and some of it can be seen as great opportunities for positive evolutionary change. How you perceive it is your choice. Anyway, it's taken a lot of time just to outline the 6. And what I'll be doing over the next several months, a couple months, assuming readers think this is worth doing, is I'll be going more through this. Like 2 weeks from now, I'll take a chapter of this, and we'll do the 30-minute show on a chapter and get into more of the details. He also used a method that you can find on his website. You can download basically the outline of the book, and it's done in something called mind maps, which are great ways to put big ideas together in a way that you can see on a page or two what is the holisticness of what I'm thinking about or talking about. It's a technique that I'll be using more and more in my teaching. Called mind maps. There's software out there about it. Anyway, a few minutes left here for calls. I'm Ed Lyell, and this is Economic Mortar at KRZA.org. You can reach us locally at 589-8844 or in Taos at 575-758-1537, or wider, our 800 number is 800-290 0887. And I'm Ed Lyell, professor of business and economics at Adams State University, where today is beginning of finals. And to me, exciting stuff. I leave, as I'm reading his book, with much more of a feeling of how we can have a better life if we take advantage of these global changes in a positive way. Don't just hunker down to protect a non-efficient status quo, but how do you design a better future? And he lays out some of the groundwork for how billions of people can do this, but with the statement that if we don't do it differently and better, then life is going to get more negative, particularly for the countries that are already wealthy, because they can't hide behind their military or political power the way they used to. And as I've harped on for months now, the United States has been doing far too much of that. The recent reports that came out that our Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, gives out tens of millions of dollars a week to President KRZA and, frankly, other leaders around the world to buy their friendship. That doesn't make sense to me. If you have to buy a friend, I don't think you have a real friend. And yet that's been apparently a major part of our political and defense policy for decades. And I've never trusted somebody who does it just for money, because as we're learning with KRZA in Afghanistan, then the Iranians will just give him money as well and negate whatever it is we wanted him to do. And he's the kind of guy that seems clear. He'll take money from everybody for every side of things. And it wouldn't even make sense if it was just my tax money, or my going into debt for it bothers me even more, because it isn't even like the U.S. has high taxes anymore, and are my governments bribing people with that money collected from me. It's instead that my government is creating money, signing off on money that we're borrowing from the Chinese and Japanese and other countries, and then we give it away. So we borrow it at interest and give it away, and we're giving it away to the neighbors of the Chinas and Japans, who have more money at this point than the U.S. does. So this is just, to me, foolish strategy based more on ego than it is on rationality. So I'm very upset with the confirmation of these stories that I and others had heard about for years. I used to have a high security clearance. I used to know about things like this, particularly in the technology area decades ago. I still have friends that are in those fields, and they don't give me any specifics, but they have been hinting at these general things for some time. Anyway, we're a call-in show. I've laid out some huge issues, perhaps overwhelming somebody, particularly if they're trying to drive. But give me a call and tell me what you think of these, or send me an email at edlyell@amigonet.com, EDLYELL at amigo.net, personal email. Or you can always reach me through Adams State University. But this all ties in also with my, what now is several-year theme about the income and wealth disparity. That's one of the real biggies that Al Gore takes on, that you cannot have a sustainable country, or even a world in his mind, if more and more the power just keeps going up to the 1% of the world. And he talks about that, and he documents that, this is why we have world revolutions. This is why America broke away from England, because our working class in America was sending all the profit to the rich in England. And we had a revolution over that. And the French had a revolution over the same issue and stormed the palace gates. The Russians did the same thing and created communism to get away from the abuses by the Tsar. And the Middle East Spring was all about income and wealth disparity and the sense of hopelessness by millions of unemployed youth. And the U.S. is moving in that direction. We have more and more likelihood of revolutions of some type. But on the other hand, and Al Gore talks about as well, and our political system is broken. Al Gore has probably even more reason than anyone to feel and make the case that it was broken, because he's one of the victims of at least alleged voter fraud. And so it just raises all kinds of questions of who are we as a country and where do we want to go? And then, because many of us in the listening area are strong into environmental concerns as well as equity, efficiency concerns, there's some real hope out there that if we do things differently, we can do things more environmentally sound, and that if we don't, it's not a good ending. And then the new data on plutocracy. Mother Jones has a good story in this from about 2010, but you can just now go out and Google plutocracy, and I did that and got a great graphic that shows the concentration in the U.S. of income and wealth, and that it's really the 1/100th% that is getting all the money, not just the 1%, but even more so the 1/100th%. 13,000 people. And this graphic points out that this disparity is higher than any time in U.S. or world history. And it's even worse than what we call the robber baron years that led to the Great Depression. For instance, in 1980, the top group basically made 15 times what the average American made. And now it's 976 times the average American. Anyway, we're running out of time. Haven't had any calls. I probably just shook you up a bit or either bored you to death. Hopefully nobody got so bored they fell asleep and drove off the road. But Al Gore's book is worth reading. His issues are worth talking about, debating, discussing. Haven't even got all the way through his conclusions, so I don't know if I'd say his recommendations are the ones I for sure go with, but his laying out of the big issues is, to me, very well researched, well done, and not political. Definitely worth paying attention to. So this has been Ed Lyell, and we got about a minute here left or less. I'm getting a signal. So this is Economic Mortar on KRZA, serving northern New Mexico and San Luis Valley. And I'll be back here in 2 weeks, and we'll take up at least one of these big issues 2 weeks from now. So thank you very much. Good morning. This is Ed Lyell, and this is Economic Mortar, a twice-monthly radio show talking about how to rebuild the U.S. economy on solid, long-term principles and not be so